The courtroom smelled like lemon polish and old sweat, a place that tried too hard to look cleaner than it was. Naomi Stratton stepped through the double doors wearing a navy blue suit that cut sharp against the wood-paneled walls. Her heels clicked once, twice, then fell into silence as the room looked up. The bailiff didn't call her name, didn't have to. She made a statement just by walking in, and at the front of the room, beneath the dark seal of the court, sat Judge Howard Gates, polishing his glasses with the same indifference one might show to a stain on a napkin. His face wrinkled in the corners not from age, but from habitual contempt. He saw her, then came the sound, a snort, a laugh, just once. Quick. No one else reacted, but Naomi heard it. She met his eyes and didn't flinch. "And Counselor Stratton," he said at last, voice dry and clipped. "And so are we expecting more theatrics today, or will you be joining us for actual law?" Murmurs behind her. Defense table, smirking, clerk, typing without looking up. 2 rows of government attorneys shifting papers like they were waiting for recess. She felt them watching her. But Naomi only placed her case folder on the table, unsnapped the brass lock, spread her fingers against the cool leather. "Today, Your Honor," she said calmly, "I'll be showing the court how $76 million was funneled out of federal infrastructure grants into shell firms run by one man." She turned slightly, making sure her voice hit the gallery, and how the system that was supposed to catch him did exactly what it was designed to do. Nothing. Silence. Then a slow chuckle, from the judge this time, not mocking but amused. That oily kind of laugh that came from knowing you were untouchable. "And sure, this will be fascinating." She didn't smile, didn't move, just waited. Judge Gates nodded toward the defense. "Mr. Lawson, you may sit comfortably. I have a feeling your weekend isn't in danger." And Charles Lawson, mid-60s, white suit, chin like a fist, leaned back in his chair like he owned the oxygen in the room. Naomi's eyes flicked to him once, then returned to the judge. "With respect, Your Honor," she said softly, "you should recuse yourself." The air cracked. A beat. Judge Gates arched one eyebrow. Excuse me?" Naomi reached into her folder and pulled the first sheet. A motion. Stamped. Filed. She held it out. But the bailiff didn't move. Of course he didn't. She walked it up herself, placed it on the edge of the bench. The judge glanced at it. He didn't touch it. "I've reviewed your little request already," he said, still not looking. "Sheet's laughable." Behind her, someone actually laughed. Naomi turned around slowly, took in every face, no anger, just notes, every smirk, every glance, every whisper. Then she looked back at Gates. "In 10 minutes, she said quietly, "you'll wish you'd taken it." Judge Gates raised his hand. "Miss Stratton, sit down." Naomi didn't move for another full second. Then she did. As she sat, the courtroom settled, but something had shifted, just slightly, and not in his favor. Naomi adjusted her chair with precision, no sound, no wasted motion, and opened her binder to the marked tab labeled "and Red Clay Development Holdings." The first domino. She rose. "In her honor," she said, holding up the file, "entered into record as Exhibit A, verified transactions between Red Clay Development Holdings and the CityWorks Infrastructure Trust, dated February to July last year." Judge Gates waved his hand with theatrical boredom. "Admitted, for whatever it's worth." She handed it to the clerk. The woman behind the desk looked at Naomi's hand, then the folder, then slowly reached for it like Naomi might be contagious. She didn't meet her eyes, didn't stamp it, just placed it to the side. Naomi clocked it. Everything got clocked. "Proceed," Gates said. Naomi turned to the jury box, half full, their eyes glazed from legal fatigue. Time to cut through. In Red Clay was awarded a $9.4 million contract to reinforce bridge supports across 4 counties. According to their invoice trail, she flipped a page, only $600,000 of that was spent on material or labor. She let the number sit. "Where did the other $8.8 million go?" she asked. You'll see that in Exhibit B, 10 wire transfers. All routed to 3 addresses in Florida, none of which match Red Clay's business registration. The defense attorney stood. Gerald Banks. Old, fat-fingered, with a permanent smirk, like his face was stuck halfway through a dirty joke. "Objection," Banks said lazily. "Speculation. Counsel is narrating before proving ownership of said accounts." "And overruled," Judge Gates muttered, like the word tasted bad. "I'll let her show us her rabbit hole. She'll get lost in it soon enough." Naomi gave no reaction, She stepped back and held up another file. Exhibit C, ownership filings from Sun Grove Financial Services in Tallahassee, Florida. The account ending in 7734 belongs to a firm founded by Mr. Charles Lawson's daughter. At the time of transfer, she was 19. A twitch. That small tick in Lawson's jaw. He didn't blink, but he stopped chewing his pen cap. Good. Naomi turned a page. On to Exhibit D. Before she could finish, a loud crack interrupted her. The court reporter had dropped her stylus. Everyone turned. She bent to pick it up, face red. Judge Gates exhaled, annoyed. And Stratton, is there a point to this parade? Yes, Naomi said, walking slowly toward the screen beside the jury. Point there is. She tapped a button on the wireless remote. The screen came alive. It displayed a flowchart. Simple, clean, cold, money, contracts, shell companies, names, photos, timelines, and right at the center, Lawson. Branching off from him, 3 contractors, 2 anonymous LLCs, and a trust fund named Grant Street Holdings. Sent over the next hour, Naomi said calmly. Sentai will show exactly how public infrastructure money was siphoned into companies created, co-signed or operated by associates of Charles Lawson, all under the oversight of people in this building. Silence again. Judge Gates leaned forward. And I hope you're not suggesting. Naomi met his gaze, unflinching, and not suggesting, demonstrating. A scoff. And you've made your dramatic display, counselor. Let's see the hard proof. She tapped. I'll get there, Naomi replied. But first. Exhibit E. She tapped the remote again. A spreadsheet filled the screen. Bank routing logs. 10 deposits. Each one falling 48 hours after federal disbursement. Routed through intermediary vendors, all of whom share a tax consultant, a man named Felix Marrow. Banks objected again. To relevance, Naomi was ready. To Mr. Marrow is the accountant for both Red Clay and Lawson Holdings. I subpoenaed his firm. They submitted files under threat of contempt. Inside, she lifted a red envelope, thick and sealed. Is every signed return filed in the last 3 fiscal years? Naomi placed the envelope on the prosecution table. And they do not match the contracts filed with the city. A beat passed. Then Judge Gates did something strange. He laughed, openly, loud. Ms. Stratton, I must admit you're entertaining. It's been years since I saw this level of, what do we call it? Persistence. He looked at the jury, and ladies and gentlemen, do try not to confuse paperwork for a smoking gun. Naomi tilted her head. No, Your Honor, she said quietly. The smoking gun comes next. The courtroom stilled. The judge's smile faltered for a split second. Naomi flipped to the next tab, a CD in a thin black sleeve. She didn't present it yet, just let it sit, halfway out of the folder, gleaming under the lights like a blade. And still, she never once raised her voice. Naomi sat back down without a sound. Not a whisper of paper, not a tap of a pen. She just lowered the file, and the CD within it, back into her folder, as if it had nowhere urgent to be, yet. She knew the room was watching it like a bomb on a timer. Judge Gates cleared his throat and sat straighter in his seat. And you've had your floor, Ms. Stratton. If you'd like to waste more taxpayer time with dots and arrows and nonsense, I'll kindly remind you this is a court of law, not a courtroom drama. Naomi looked up. Your Honor, I move for immediate examination of Exhibits A through E and admission of CD Audio 1, submitted as corroborative material. Denied, he said instantly. Your evidence is circumstantial and improperly contextualized. She expected that. Naomi turned her head slowly, not toward the judge but toward the jury. 12 men and women, a few blinking hard. One leaned forward, eyes narrowing. The kind of denial Gates had just issued. That was procedural sabotage, obvious. It played differently when everyone could feel it. Naomi stood again, calmly. She picked up a thinner, unmarked folder and approached the screen again. Her heels echoed in the tense air. Let's talk about motive, she said. It's not just the theft, it's who enabled it. Banks groaned audibly. Your Honor, you're not going to like this next name, Naomi continued, loud enough to override the room. But I promise it won't be the last surprise today. She opened the folder, showed the first page to the screen. A photo. Publicity still. City Hall. Naomi tapped the name on the screen. Charles Edward Lawson Jr., same grin, same chin, same eyes. Naomi looked directly at Lawson at the defense table. Do you deny signing the red clay disbursement forms on behalf of CityWorks? Lawson shifted. My assistant handles most filings. Your signature appears on each. We verified handwriting through 3 independent analysts. Exhibit F. She placed the documents on the table beside her like laying cards before a doomed poker player. Oh, you've been claiming innocence, Mr. Lawson. That this money moved without your knowledge. That the shell companies were coincidence. But here, she held up a highlighted excerpt. We see a memo sent from your office on February 12th, approving over $7 million in discretionary city funds. Those funds ended up in the personal accounts of Red Clay Holdings within 48 hours. Lawson said nothing. Banks remained standing. His voice was raised now. When we object to this ambush. Judge Gates narrowed his eyes. And I warned you about this, Miss Stratton. You keep grandstanding, and I'll find you in contempt. Naomi looked directly at him. Oh, that would be ironic, she said coldly, and given the content of CD Audio 1. The judge stiffened. But Naomi didn't push it yet. Instead, she turned her attention toward the court guards, one near the door, one just behind the defense rail. Both had been snickering earlier. Now they were still. You ever watch a lever snap under pressure? Naomi said, addressing no one in particular. And you think it's solid, you lean on it, but it's rotting underneath. Then one day the wrong hand grabs it, and it breaks, fast, loud. She paced slowly now, not for effect but control. Everyone's asking how this got missed. How all these filings, numbers, fake vendors made it through audit after audit. But the real question isn't how, it's who helped it pass through unchecked. Judge Gates shifted. Naomi picked up another folder, slimmer, and walked it to the clerk's desk again. This time she didn't wait for the clerk to reach for it. She laid it flat. Your Honor, I request this document be placed under seal for now. It contains the names of 8 current city officials connected to the Lawson pipeline. I'll present them under oath when called. The room sucked in breath. Even Banks didn't move. Naomi turned, walked back to her table, and sat. Smooth, silent, surgical. No one said anything for a long moment. Then Judge Gates leaned forward, hands steepled, and spoke like a man trying not to grit his teeth. We will reconvene after recess, 15 minutes. His gavel came down. Too fast, too loud. He stood and left the bench. Naomi didn't move. Neither did Lawson. But as the room rustled into motion, Naomi turned just enough to see him, the little twitch in his eyelid, the sudden interest in his fingernails, the way he didn't look at his lawyer. And then, just barely, she smiled. The hallway outside Courtroom 6 Billions hummed with fluorescent light and whispers. The sound of a building trying to pretend it wasn't holding its breath. Naomi stood alone near the water cooler, untouched cup in hand, watching her reflection in the glass pane of a fire extinguisher cabinet. Her posture was relaxed, but her fingers moved in rhythmic patterns against the cup. 1, 2, pause. 1, 2. Inside, the courtroom door creaked open. She didn't look. Charles Lawson stepped out, flanked by his attorney Gerald Banks, who immediately peeled off to take a call. Lawson, left alone, shifted uncomfortably. He looked around like a man who'd suddenly misplaced his armor. Naomi didn't move. She let him hover 5 steps away, pretending he wasn't drifting toward her. When he got close enough to speak, she beat him to it. Ever think about how fast everything falls apart once a name gets spoken aloud? She asked. He blinked. Oh, excuse me? Naomi turned slightly, meeting his eyes. People can do anything as long as they stay a name on a paper, an invoice, a routing code. But once they're said out loud, there's no going back. Lawson's mouth opened, then closed. You're making this more than it is, he said finally. And you want to be famous. Headlines. Some grandstanding. Sandal already turned down the 60 Minutes interview, she said coolly. You're not the story, Mr. Lawson. You're just the first. His lips tightened. She stepped closer, voice low but surgical. And you were sloppy. But not stupid. You're the piece that fits. That's why I haven't submitted that CD yet. A pause. Lawson squinted. What's on it? Naomi tilted her head. You know what's on it. The only thing you should be wondering is whether your name's in the background or foreground when it plays. A door creaked. Bailiff exited the courtroom. Their eyes met. No smile, but no smirk this time either. Back inside, the judge had returned. Naomi walked past Lawson without another word, entering the courtroom like she'd never left. Inside, the room was quieter now. The side chatter had died. Even the clerk's fingers hovered a second longer over the keyboard before she resumed typing. Naomi sat, slowly, deliberately. The judge shuffled papers, clearly agitated. He tapped his gavel once, not to bring order, but like he needed to remind himself he still held it. "We'll resume," he said. "Ms. Stratton, if you insist on dragging this farce into the next stage, I suggest you tread carefully." Naomi stood. No folder this time. No theatrics. Just one printed page. "Before we move forward," she said evenly, "and I'd like to introduce a supplemental document, a maintenance requisition from Red Clay's West. Pullman site, signed by a city inspector who, according to payroll records, was on leave the entire month of May." She held up the page. "Forgery?" the judge asked, almost bored. "Staging," Naomi replied. "Denty inspection never happened, and the inspector whose name is on it died in 2019. This time, it hit." The jury rustled. Banks leaned forward in his chair. Even the guards by the exit traded a glance. Naomi walked it to the screen. One tap, and the image appeared. The document, clean, stamped. Then a second image. The obituary of the city inspector, dated 5 months before the invoice was signed. Gates said nothing. Naomi turned to the room. "We are no longer talking about vague impropriety or bookkeeping irregularities. We're talking about fraud, with victims, a paper trail forged by people who knew exactly what would happen if someone pulled the thread." She let it hang in the air, then turned to Lawson. "And would you like to explain the discrepancy now, Mr. Lawson?" Lawson shifted again. His hands gripped the arms of his chair like the room had tilted. I have no knowledge of that document." Naomi didn't answer. She just looked at him, and let everyone else hear the hesitation in his voice. At the clerk's desk, a small red light blinked on the side of a device. Audio recording still active. The courtroom had gone from contemptuous to uncertain. No one laughed. No one whispered. Even Judge Gates, for the first time that day, didn't lean back in his chair. He leaned forward. And Naomi? She didn't smile. She simply opened her folder again. The CD now sat at the top, waiting. The lights above the courtroom flickered once. Not enough to disrupt, but enough to feel like the building itself was shivering. Naomi Stratton remained standing beside her table, one hand resting lightly on the folder, the other hovering just above the disc. "Your Honor," she said calmly. "And now submit CD Audio 1 for the court's immediate review under protective chain of custody request." Judge Gates blinked, then sneered. "Under what grounds?" "Under Title 18, she replied. "Section 1519. Evidence tampering. The contents pertain directly to the obstruction of an ongoing federal investigation, including the willful destruction of documents and the issuing of unlawful orders to court staff." The judge laughed, actually laughed. Banks raised both eyebrows. Naomi, unmoved, continued. The audio was recorded on March 9th at 4:12 p.m. It contains the voice of a seated judge in this court, instructing a staff member to shred anything bearing my signature from that month and wipe the server backup. Silence. Her hand now slid the CD out. She placed it in a clear plastic sleeve, walked it forward. This time the bailiff stepped in to intercept it. No smirks, no reluctance. He held it like it was warm. Judge Gates's voice dropped a register. "To made the recording." Naomi met his eyes. "And a whistleblower, whose identity is sealed, and whose affidavit, time-stamped and verified, has already been submitted to the Department of Justice." No one moved. The only sound was the faint hum of the AV screen. Judge Gates opened his mouth, then closed it. His fingers tapped the armrest, faster now. From the gallery someone whispered, "Play it." Naomi heard it. So did the jury. She looked to the clerk. "I request the court permit playback." Gates didn't respond. The clerk hesitated, then looked at the judge. His jaw clenched, his hand hovered. He didn't strike the gavel, he didn't deny the motion. He did nothing. That was enough. The clerk reached for the disc, slid it into the courtroom player system. A pause, a flicker, then static, then a breath, a chair creaking. Then, "Judge Gates on recording, I don't care what they filed. If it's signed, shred it. Digitals too, clean the server, I want this gone." "That's not a request," gasps. A rustle through the courtroom like wind sweeping dried leaves. Naomi didn't blink. She stepped forward, clicked the remote again, paused the audio, then advanced it. Another voice, quieter, nervous. "Staff member on recording. What if someone subpoenas Judge Gates? but no one will. I am the Funt King subpoena. Do it. Dead silence. In real time, Judge Gates sat frozen, his mouth parted but no words emerged, no laughter, no sneer, just silence. The bailiff by the wall stepped away from his post. 2 federal marshals entered from the back, not fast, deliberate, controlled. One walked to the side of the bench, the other remained by the door, hands clasped in front, guns holstered. The gallery watched, jaws slack. No one said a word, no one breathed. Naomi turned to face the judge directly. Her voice was soft, but it filled the room. When you should have taken the recusal. She stepped back, and Judge Gates, eyes glassy, fingers trembling, said nothing. He didn't even protest as the marshal at his side produced a warrant. He just stared at Naomi like he'd seen her before. Somewhere in a nightmare, where the mask he wore finally cracked open. The marshal read the charge: obstruction, evidence destruction, abuse of authority. Cuffs clicked shut. He stood barely, and the courtroom did not make a sound. As they led him away, past the jury, past the attorneys, past Naomi, he didn't look at anyone, especially not her, because she hadn't come to win. She'd come to end him, and she had. The courtroom door clicked shut behind the marshals. Gates was gone. And still, no one spoke. Naomi didn't move, not yet. She stood at her table with the silence thick around her, watching how it changed the room, watching the faces in the gallery, the clerk, the bailiff, even Gerald Banks, who suddenly looked like a man who'd realized his umbrella was made of paper in the middle of a downpour. Across from her, Lawson sat completely still, not shaken, not pale, thinking. He wasn't Gates. Gates had roared and postured, believing the robe made him untouchable. Lawson was a survivor, a planner, and now he was recalculating. Naomi could see it in the way his fingers curled under the table, not clenched in panic, but rhythmically tapping, pacing himself. He knew what came next. Naomi took her time gathering the papers on the table. No sudden moves, no grand gestures. Then she turned toward the judge's bench, empty now, and spoke without raising her voice. In light of the court's sudden vacancy, she said, I move for a continuance of the hearing under emergency judicial oversight. The clerk didn't respond immediately. No one seemed to know if the court was still functioning. But then the second door opened, near the jury box, and a tall woman in a black suit stepped in. Sharp gray streak through her hair, ID badge already in hand. District oversight has been notified, the woman said. Tennis court is now under provisional supervision pending reassignment. She approached the bench, didn't sit in the judge's seat, just placed a file on the wood. Banks cleared his throat. This is a mistrial. It has to be. Actually, the woman replied calmly. This is still very much your trial, Mr. Banks. We're just skipping the part where you pretend it isn't real. She looked to Naomi. Continue. Naomi turned, faced Lawson directly. He didn't move. She picked up a folder marked Minisk and opened it slowly. Charles Edward Lawson, she began, has been the authorized signatory for 3 municipal grant programs since 2017. During that time, over $122 million in disbursements have been authorized under his name. She paused. Then to same name that appears on offshore filings in the British Virgin Islands. Lawson's jaw twitched. Naomi opened a second folder. Eintabakholder Altbolder at Exhibit G. Articles of Incorporation for a company called Quaystone Limited. Founded 2 years ago by C.E. Lawson and a co-signer named T. Emmerich. That name, as we found, is a registered alias for your personal attorney. Banks stood up. Your Honor, she's not qualified to. She's not wrong, said the woman at the bench. Banks sat down faster than he'd stood. Naomi didn't even look at him. She pressed a button on the remote. The screen behind her changed. A satellite image appeared. Beachfront property, white sand, steel and glass mansion with a yacht docked behind it. This was purchased 9 months ago through Quaystone Limited. Then flipped through 2 holding companies based in Luxembourg and re-entered into the States via a Delaware trust. Naomi turned slowly toward the jury. "And to money laundering," she said. Then looked back at Lawson. "And you signed all of it." Finally, Lawson blinked. Naomi walked to the table and placed the folder down gently, then leaned forward, just enough for her voice to drop. "So here's how this goes, Charles. You start talking, right now, or I make you the public face of every filthy hand in this city. And you know what happens to people like that?" He said nothing. She leaned closer. "And they don't get lawyers. They get burned." A long pause. Then Lawson whispered, without looking up, "What happens if I cooperate?" Naomi didn't smile. She just picked up the last folder and said, "When then I make you the first witness instead of the first defendant." Behind her, the clerk's pen finally resumed its tap-tap-tap. The room began to breathe again, and Charles Lawson looked up, and for the first time all day, his eyes showed fear. Lawson's voice came out hoarse. "A1, I want a deal." Naomi didn't nod. She didn't reassure. She opened her folders slowly, deliberately, like a surgeon laying out scalpels before cutting. "I'll get nothing until you give me something," she said. "Something real, not crumbs." Lawson's lawyer leaned in, whispering. Naomi didn't interrupt. She let the sweat on Lawson's temple do the talking. Finally, he cleared his throat, looked at her. "There's a fund," he said. "It's called Elm Root Pacific." She waited. "It's not listed under my name. It's filtered through 2 educational nonprofits. But I move the money. I sign the checks. It's where we park contracts before they're scrubbed." And Naomi's eyes sharpened. "So many people have access." Lawson hesitated. "And to at least 6 city councilmen, a few procurement officers, and 1 guy in the Department of Justice." That got the room's attention. Even Banks stiffened. "Aren't you saying federal?" Naomi asked. Lawson nodded slowly. "Auntie signs off on audits. Make sure nobody asks questions about which firms get pre-qualified. You think Judge Gates was the top of this?" "He was a doorman." The woman standing in for judicial oversight spoke up, voice tight. "I'll need those names in writing. Sworn deposition. No protection until corroboration." Naomi didn't take her eyes off Lawson. "I'll give them to me now." She reached into her bag and pulled out a blank witness affidavit form, one of several she'd brought, just in case. Lawson stared at it like it might bite him. Then slowly, he took the pen from the table. Naomi handed him another file. Inside it, a printed list of 47 contract numbers, with columns of names cross-referenced from tax records, property deeds, and vendor databases. She tapped the list. "Start highlighting." He did. Naomi stepped back, watching him work, hands shaking slightly as he drew yellow lines down names that had sat safe and silent for years. Councilman Trevors, Deputy Chief Farrell, Marcus Kinlan from State Procurement, Edna Holtz, the Port Authority's operations manager, one after another. By the time he hit the 4th name, the courtroom had gone dead quiet again. The jury was no longer passive. Now they were leaning forward, every eye locked on the list. Each name he marked was like a fuse lit. Naomi spoke softly. "How much of the city's budget did this group control?" Lawson swallowed hard. 40% at least. "Plot how long?" "In 12 years. Maybe more." The woman at the bench stepped away, whispered into a phone. Her eyes widened. Naomi watched her, then turned back to Lawson. "Might tell me about the mayor?" Lawson's face twitched. "I can't, or won't." He didn't answer. Naomi stepped forward again. "Mr. Lawson, you're not a whistleblower. You're a wheel. If this thing turns without you, the entire city collapses on you first." He looked down, then up. "Fintee doesn't take money directly," Lawson said. But his brother-in-law does, a firm called Landbridge Civic Development. They donate to his re-election. On paper, it's clean." Naomi took the affidavit and turned it over. "Sign it." He hesitated only once. Then he did. By the end of the day, the courtroom was sealed. The gallery cleared. U.S. attorneys had begun arriving, quiet men in dark suits. One of them Naomi recognized from a corruption task force hearing 2 years ago. He nodded at her. Not warm, but with respect. Outside, rain began to fall. Inside, Naomi stood at the window, watching Lawson's affidavit being scanned and sealed into evidence bags. Behind her, someone whispered, "He just brought down half the damn city." Naomi didn't turn. Her eyes stayed on the storm, and for the first time since the trial began, she allowed herself to exhale. The wood-paneled walls of the congressional hearing room were polished to a false gleam, and the microphones on the table caught every breath, every paper shift, like gunshots. Naomi Stratton sat upright in the witness chair. Alone, her blue suit was the same cut she'd worn on the first day of trial, not by accident. Across from her, the House Oversight Subcommittee on Government Corruption. 12 members, half of them looked like they'd already chosen a side. The chairman leaned into his mic. "Ms. Stratton, for the record, please state your full name and title." She didn't blink. "Naomi Stratton, Senior Counsel for Public Accountability, Chicago District Court, Acting Federal Liaison for the Lawson Testimony Hearings." Click. His mic went off. Another clicked on. A senator, older, gray-templed, impatient. You're saying this network existed for over a decade and no one in federal oversight caught it? Naomi's voice was steady. Until I'm saying no one wanted to catch it. A pause. Whispers. She continued. Funding allocations were approved based on a predictable pattern. Shell companies were rotated through fake bidding processes. Internal audits were redirected by a single DOJ official embedded in the review chain. That person has now been indicted. Click. Another mic. But do you believe this is isolated to Chicago? Naomi opened her folder and held up a document. Federal procurement entries. And these same vendors received contracts in Atlanta, Newark, Baltimore, and parts of Detroit. We're currently tracing them through the same signatures and tax IDs. The room shifted. Even the cameras grew quieter. Naomi leaned forward slightly. The system isn't broken, she said. It's designed. A functional network of plausible deniability wrapped in procedure. A congresswoman, sharp southern accent, narrowed her eyes. And where does it end, Ms. Stratton? Naomi looked her dead in the eye. It ends when we stop pretending we don't know who profits. The chairman cleared his throat, visibly shaken. Do you have a list of names involved at the federal level? Yes, Naomi replied. 42, and growing. Your staff has received the first 10. The rest are being processed through secure channels as they're verified. Click, click, click. The room was now fully quiet. Not angry, not combative. Stunned, Naomi could feel it. That shift. The room had expected performance. She'd given them evidence. The chairman leaned forward again. 8-1 last question. Why you? Naomi considered that, then leaned forward herself, voice calm and lethal. Because no one else did. Outside the chamber, the hallway was lined with cameras, reporters, guards. Naomi exited quietly. No statement, no applause. Just her walking into the sunlight, flanked by 2 staffers, her files tucked under one arm, sunglasses pulled low. As she reached the stairs, her phone buzzed. A message from the DOJ's Office of Inspector General. New name confirmed. Level 1 federal appointment. Previously untouchable. Now, not. She typed back. Add him to the pile. The TV buzzed slightly as the screen filled the dim living room with the cold, crisp light of C-SPAN. The couch sagged slightly in the middle. A lone oscillating fan turned from side to side, stirring up the scent of laundry detergent and old floor wax. On the television, Naomi Stratton stood behind a podium. Calm, sharp, clear. The camera wasn't zoomed in. The lighting was flat. But her voice still cut through the screen like glass. We're not asking anymore. We're not hoping. We're not waiting for a seat. We're pulling the whole damn table down if we have to. A pause. No applause in the room she stood in. Just those words. Then silence. In the living room, a little girl sat cross-legged on the carpet, wearing a faded Bulls t-shirt 2 sizes too big. She had a pencil tucked behind one ear and a spiral notebook open in front of her, pages covered in uneven cursive and doodles of courthouse columns. Behind her, her mother stood in the kitchen doorway, one hand holding a dish rag, the other covering her mouth. The girl didn't blink. She reached up slowly, removed the pencil, and scribbled something quickly in the margin. Then she turned her head, not away from the screen, but just slightly. Enough for her voice to carry without disrupting the moment. Mom. Her mother lowered her hand. I want to be like her. The fan turned, kept turning. The TV flickered a little as Naomi's speech faded into voiceover. A congressman tried to change the subject. Naomi let him. She didn't need to win the argument. She'd already won something else. The little girl's mother stepped forward slowly and sat on the edge of the couch. Neither of them said anything else. On the screen, Naomi looked past the podium, right into the camera. Like she already knew who was watching,